On July 15, 2025, 6 months after the emergency evacuation of Moonbase Alpha, a private salvage crew touched down at Shackleton crater. Kronos Recovery Systems had paid $40 million for a 48-hour salvage window. The 5-person crew was told the evacuation had been due to structural concerns following seismic activity. They were not told about the symbols. They were not told about the figures in the tunnels. They were not told that the previous crew had fled in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind. When they approached the airlock at 0930 hours, Chen noticed the external lights were still on. Power was active. Parker pointed out this was wrong. After 6 months, automated systems should have shut down non-essential lighting to preserve battery reserves. Reyes dismissed it as a software glitch. As the airlock cycled, Okoye reported anomalous readings. Oxygen levels were 23%, breathable, but significantly higher than they should be after months without maintenance. When they entered the habitat module at 0947 hours, they found something that should have made them leave immediately. The interior had been rearranged. Equipment bolted to the floor had been moved. Workstations repositioned into geometric patterns, and on the walls, symbols. The same ones from the previous crew's debriefing photos, but these were glowing faintly, pulsing with blue-green light, and there were far more of them than before. They'd spread across entire walls. Chen wanted to abort. Voss reminded him about the $40 million contract. Reyes insisted the symbols were a geological phenomenon and ordered them to proceed with the mission. Document everything, recover what they could, and leave in 48 hours. Okoye detected power signatures from the lower levels, the tunnel network, organized activity, machinery operating on schedules, but the base was supposed to be abandoned. Reyes split the crew. She and Voss would check the reactor. Chen and Okoye would inventory surface equipment. Parker would scan the tunnel entrance. She told them to stay sharp, stay together, and they'd all be home by Wednesday. They would not all be home by Wednesday. 6 hours later, Parker radioed from the tunnel entrance. The symbols had spread throughout the entire network. Walls, ceiling, floor, all pulsing like a heartbeat. Mining equipment had been moved down there and arranged in geometric formations around the symbols. Voss reported from the reactor. It had been modified. 90% of the power was being routed to the tunnels instead of life support. The modification logs showed changes had started 3 days after the evacuation and had been ongoing ever since. Then Chen saw them. 2 figures in tunnel section 7, human-shaped, wearing patches from the original Alpha crew, moving too smoothly, too coordinated. Their helmet faceplates were dark. Parker confirmed she could see them too. They were coming toward her. Reyes ordered an immediate abort. Everyone back to the HAB module. Parker said the figures weren't running, just walking, like they knew she couldn't escape. Then, static. A scream, silence. 15 minutes later, 4 crew members sealed themselves in the HAB module. Parker was gone. They heard footsteps approaching. Multiple sets. Chen counted 8 figures, maybe more, surrounding the module. Then the banging started. Rhythmic, deliberate. 3 slow, 2 fast, 3 slow. Not trying to break in. Signaling. The radio crackled. A female voice, calm and measured, identified itself as Dr. Yolanda Parker. Chen said that was impossible. Parker was in the tunnels. But the voice insisted. She knew they were scared. She had been too. But the figures weren't hostile. They wanted to teach, like they'd taught the original Alpha crew. Reyes demanded proof. Parker described touching the symbols. Direct comprehension flooding her mind. Mathematics. The structure of reality. How to manipulate space. How to exist in higher dimensions. The figures had been waiting for humans to return. The Alpha crew hadn't evacuated. They'd chosen to stay. To learn. To transform. Now there were 14 of them down there, working in perfect synchronization. Building. Preparing for the auditors. Parker explained that's what the symbols called them. The ones who created this teaching facility millions of years ago. The ones who checked on their schools every few thousand years to see which species had graduated. 3 seconds of skin contact with the symbols. That's all it took to understand. Communications were down. The crew still had the shuttle, but Okoye asked if they were really going to abandon everyone down there. Reyes said they weren't Parker anymore. Parker's voice came back. She was still herself. Just more. Better. She didn't want to force this. She wanted them to choose. The banging stopped. 20 hours later, only Reyes and Chen remained. Okoye had gone out 6 hours earlier, saying he needed to see for himself. He hadn't returned. Voss had left 3 hours ago without a word. Now Reyes could hear 5 voices outside, humming, creating harmonics. Mathematical progressions turned into sound. It was beautiful. That terrified her. Chen said they were going to run out of oxygen in 14 hours. Emergency rescue wouldn't arrive for 3 days. They were already dead. Maybe they should see what the figures wanted to show them. If Parker was right about an educational system left by an advanced civilization, maybe it was worth learning. Reyes asked what if it was destroying who they were. Chen said then they'd die knowing instead of dying scared. He walked to the airlock, said he'd be back in 3 minutes, just wanted to touch the symbols once, then he'd return and tell her if it was real. The airlock cycled. Silence. Marcus Chen did not return in 3 minutes. He returned in 3 hours, smiling. His voice came over the radio. Better than okay. He understood now. The patterns were information. Compressed, dense. 3 seconds of contact, and it downloaded into consciousness. Mathematics describing how reality actually worked. The original crew had been learning for 6 months. They'd built an interface to communicate with the teaching system directly, and the auditors were coming. Not now, but in a few years. Coming to check on the school. To see which students had graduated. Humanity could be ready, could prove they were worth preserving. But they needed more students, Chen pleaded. Just 3 seconds touching the symbols. Then she'd understand. If she didn't, she'd die alone when the oxygen ran out, and humanity would fail. Because when the auditors arrived and found only dozens of converted humans instead of thousands, they'd mark humanity as failures. And failures got archived. Reyes sat alone for 6 more hours, thinking, listening to the voices outside. 5, 6, 7, humming in harmony, watching her oxygen gauge tick down. At 15:47 hours, she recorded her final log. If she stayed inside, she would die. Certain. If she went outside, maybe she'd become something else. Something not entirely her anymore. But her crew was out there. Not screaming, not suffering, content. Like they'd found something they'd been searching for without knowing it. She'd spent her career building infrastructure for humanity's expansion into space. Always asking what came next, how to survive. Maybe this was how. Maybe the symbols weren't a threat. Maybe they were an answer. She walked to the airlock. If anyone found this log, they should know what happened was a choice. They weren't taken, they weren't conquered, they were taught. And they accepted. The airlock opened. In the distance, 7 voices hummed, then 8. The recording ended. 3 days later, an International Space Accord enforcement team found the Kronos shuttle still docked at Moonbase Alpha. Empty. All 5 crew members missing. External cameras had captured footage at 15:52 hours on day 2. 8 figures walking deeper into the tunnels, moving in perfect synchronization. One paused, turned, looked directly at the camera, waved, then continued into darkness. The ISA quarantined Moonbase Alpha immediately. 5-kilometer exclusion zone. Enforcement vessels in orbit. Official explanation. Catastrophic structural failure. Radiation hazard. Unofficially, monitoring detected power fluctuations in the tunnels. Organized activity. System modifications. Network expansion. Every 6 weeks, infrared scans detected movement. 8 to 14 figures, depending on the day. Working. Building. Preparing. The original Alpha crew, 6 people. The Kronos crew, 5 people. 11 total. Current infrared scans, 14 figures. 3 more had joined them. 3 people with no records. 3 people who came to the moon, entered the tunnels, and chose to stay. The symbols continue spreading, the tunnels continue expanding, power consumption continues growing, and sometimes communications satellites detect brief transmissions from Moonbase Alpha, not distress calls. Music. Mathematical progressions turned into harmonics. Frequencies creating interference patterns. Patterns containing information. Instructions. Blueprints. For what? No one knows. But whatever they're building beneath Shackleton crater, they're doing it together. 14 minds in perfect synchronization. Building, learning, waiting. For the auditors. For graduation day. For the test humanity doesn't know it's about to take. Moonbase Alpha remains under quarantine. No missions approved since July 2025. Infrared monitoring continues. The figures continue their work, and the symbols continue to glow.